Well, again, welcome to those of you here in the room, those of you watching online, and boy, doesn't that make you feel happy to come to church seeing those? But the reality of our world, especially today, it feels like even more so, is what you saw on that bumper video. The reality is a lot of us, maybe you, maybe people you know within your circles, have these really fearful feelings or these feelings of, is everything going to be okay? I mean, if you look at our culture and specifically currently our city and the things that have happened and whatever your thoughts are on all of that, it causes us to go, oh my goodness, what is going on, right? And there are those moments maybe in your own spiritual life where you go, is God really in control? Or how in the world am I going to get through the next day? And there are certain questions that we have even connected with that is Jesus enough to take care of everything that we see in our world, right? There are those moments where there's these questions, and it's maybe a specific question that we ask that with all this craziness and the unsettling and the in my own life and what does this year hold? Maybe the question is this all there is to life? I mean, not because life maybe for you is bad or that your faith is gone, but because when things are fine, and I don't know if you're like this, I kind of get this way a little bit. When things are just kind of going along great, I kind of get a little restless. And it's not boredom, it's just like I get restless and I don't know what that is about. And I'm not actually alone in that because research consistently shows that a majority of adults, even people of faith, you and me, describe themselves as spiritually stagnant at some point in their lives. 6 in 10 churchgoers say they feel stuck or unfulfilled. 2025, yeah, get that out of here, right? I'm excited about what's going on because 2025, I just felt so stuck and stagnant. And it's not rebellion in your life. It's not unbelief. It's just restlessness. Part of that restlessness comes from the busyness of our lives. 70% of Americans say they're busy all the time, and most of that 70% say it causes me to feel exhausted, even spiritually. And it's not like we doubt Jesus. I don't walk away from faith. But if I'm honest, I sometimes look for more clarity, more momentum, more fulfillment. And here's what I've learned. It's entirely possible to believe in Jesus and still treat him as just part of a fulfilled or a full life instead of the center of my life. Statistics tell us what's happening around us, but our hearts tell us what's happening within us, right? And that quiet question, is this all there is often a signal that that you haven't rejected Jesus. He's just been crowded out by the noise of life. Why does life feel so heavy, even though I'm doing all the right things? Why do I feel like I'm always chasing something? Why does my faith sometimes feel like I'm not quite good enough or strong enough to kind of hold everything together? And those thoughts and those questions cause us to kind of feel a couple of different things. Maybe because of that you feel alienated. You feel just, I see all these people online who have the perfect family and the perfect Christmas and New Year, and they're doing all these trips. I just feel so alienated from that. Or maybe you're in a situation coming into 2026 where you're just searching. You're searching for something different, something more. Maybe you're searching for something less. Or maybe you feel, because of the busyness and the schedules, you just feel fragmented. You're all over the place. 1 minute or 1 hour you're thinking or doing this, the next 10 seconds you're thinking and doing this, and it just feels like you're all over the place. And again, the issue for you and me, it isn't disbelief, it's displacement, because we've moved Jesus from the center to just being part of the rest of our lives. We live in a world that says that's quite not, that isn't quite enough for you. And we're overextended. But what's really interesting about the book of the Bible we're talking about, book of Colossians, this book could have been written 2 days ago and given to the world 2 days ago, and everyone would go, wow, that's 100% yes. This is what our life is. This is what our culture is. Because it's so relevant. And that, as a side, that's why we really need to constantly be in the Word. We do well here at our church with Bible studies and the Bible recap and individual studies, but we consistently need to be in the Word, especially for such a time as this. So, if you've ever felt overextended, spiritually busy, or responsible to hold everything together, you're in good company, because this little church in the city of Colossae was in the same place. The city back then, when Paul was writing to this city, the city itself was seeing a lot of economic, military decline, social decline. Things were falling apart. Kind of sounds like today. That's why this is so appropriate for today. And so Paul sees all of this, and he writes to this church, not with a list of corrections. Because if you know the New Testament, there are other churches, like for the Corinthian church, where the church was the people were just all messed up, and he goes, okay, here's what's going wrong, here's what you need to do, here are the 5 things you need to do to get your house in order. He doesn't do that with Colossians, because he realizes there's a bigger picture here. There's a bigger picture here. And so Paul writes not with this list, but with this. He writes with a vision of Jesus so big, so complete, so sufficient that it changes how we see, or how that church sees, everything else. That's why the series is called This Changes Everything. And this changing everything is a recentered vision of who Jesus is and where he belongs in your life, okay? I almost called this series Reset, because it is like the beginning of the year, we're kind of resetting our life, our faith, our thoughts, our hearts on what we actually need to be. Because with everything we see around our world, our country, and especially our great state of Minnesota, right? It's easy to respond to the events surrounding the shooting, ICE, police. It's easy to just respond with impulses or with others' opinions or what we hear on the news. And just we feel this wide range of emotions. And you wonder, has Jesus, where is Jesus? And if you've ever felt that way, if that's true, then we have to remember this. And this is kind of a quick reset. Jesus is not an add-on to your life. He's the center. He is the center of your life. He's not just someone, oh yeah, I'll think about Jesus here, maybe on Sundays, maybe Wednesday night at youth or whatever. Jesus is the center of your life. Each week, as we walk through the Colossians study, I'm going to treat it a little bit like a Bible study, because Paul lifts up our eyes, and I kind of want to walk through these chapters. And so, if you want to follow along in the Pew Bible, page 983 is where the book of Colossians is. And I'll have some of the verses up here, but we need to kind of sync up our own thoughts and our minds with what Paul is writing to the Colossians, because we're all kind of in the same boat. We're just 2,000 years different, okay? So Paul begins in Colossians 1, starting in verse 15, again with this backdrop of this group of people that are disillusioned, that are adding things to, I need to be doing this, I should do this, I'm a good Christian, but I should be doing all these things. He resets the whole thing, and he says this in verse 1:15. He, meaning Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. And the Greek word for image is the word icon, which is where we get icon from. Right? It doesn't mean this vague resemblance. It means an exact representation. Like if you've ever wondered, what is God like? You just look at Jesus. Like, does God love people who are on the outskirts? Well, what did Jesus do? Those are the people Jesus went to. Does God love people who have wealth or who are in high society? Well, look at what Jesus did. Jesus went to those kinds of people as well. So if you want to know what God is like, you look at Jesus, because it's not just a partial picture. Jesus reveals God. Like what we read in the gospel, John 1. In the beginning was the Word, meaning Jesus, and the Word was God, and in him, in Jesus, was life, and that life was the light of men. Right? This is the Epiphany. Last week was Epiphany Sunday. It's the light. It's this epiphany of who God is through the lens of Jesus. And so when we look at Jesus, we see God's heart, we see God's character, God's intentions clearly. And when Paul says Jesus is the firstborn over all creation, God is reminding us that Jesus holds authority over everything that exists. Way back when a couple hundred years, maybe even closer, after Jesus ascended into heaven, there was this church controversy. Was Jesus God, or was he just created afterwards and then became like a God? And they used this verse to say, no, he's the firstborn over all creation. Well, that means Jesus was just this created being. He was a good guy, and this heresy came in. And then, you realize he's the firstborn over all creation. That word firstborn, or that phrase in the New Testament, is talking about authority. It's talking about a position, not the created piece. He's not part of the creation. He stands over it. And so verse 16, God continues in this reset. He says, for by him, by Jesus, all things were created. And every time I read this blows my mind, because if this is true, Jesus created the tree on which he was killed. Let that sink in. He created the execution tool that allowed him to go and pay for your sin willingly. He created all things, and all things have been created through him and for him. See, everything exists because of Jesus. Everything. Imagine this. You walk into a concert hall. Right? Picture a big concert hall. The lights are on. You get there early. The stage is all set. The instruments are all tuned. Every chair is in place. Every cable and thing is all run. And you might think, wow, this is just really a really great room. But then the musician walks out. And suddenly that whole setting makes sense. Everything makes sense. The stage wasn't the point. The sound system wasn't the point. The lights weren't the point. They were built by the musician and for the musician. Well, without the setup, all the lights and everything, the music really couldn't be heard. But without the musician, everything else is given meaning. That's how it is with Jesus. Paul says that this universe, everything was created by Christ and was created for him. So, which means, it kind of means the question isn't how does Jesus fit into my life? It's how does my life fit into Jesus? When Jesus is absent, creation feels just empty. But when Jesus is present, everything finds its purpose. And then this line that quietly, it just kind of also blows my mind a little bit. In him, in Jesus, everything holds together. You weren't meant to manage the universe. Maybe you need to tell your spouse that. You're not the general contractor of the universe. Lighten up. Don't do that. Bad advice. But you weren't meant to manage it. You weren't meant to prove something. You weren't meant to fix yourself. You weren't meant to keep going without falling apart. Now, we do those things, because those are healthy things, but ultimately, Jesus is the one who holds it together. Christ holds it together. Christ is not only the creator of life, he sustains it, right? Isaiah 40 that we read, the Lord is the everlasting God. He does not faint or grow weary. He gives strength to the weary. God never intended you to carry the full weight of your life. And then as we keep going in the verses, right, verse 18, it brings it a little closer. Jesus, he is the head of the body, which is the church. And we know that we've talked here, the church isn't the building, it's not the organization, it's not the 503c, it's the people gathered is the church. So he's the head of us. He's our leader. He's our guide. And he's not distant. He leads, he directs, he gives life. And through his resurrection, God also announces something new. Verse 18, he's the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have supremacy. Death doesn't have the final word. Remember, firstborn, over and above the ultimate ruler of authority. So Jesus is even over death. Brokenness doesn't define your future. And a lot of us have a lot of brokenness in our past. Some of us have brokenness that we're having to deal with right now. But Jesus is over that. Verse 19. He came to reconcile all things to himself by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. And if you're an accountant, you know the word reconcile is basically taking the ones and the tens and the hundreds and reconciling it to be in alignment, perfect alignment, like your bank statement. We don't do that anymore, but we used to. For those of you who are younger, we used to get the statement in the mail, and then we would just check everything off. Remember when we reconciled all that? It's pretty automatic now, but it's a reconciliation of your bank account, but God reconciled us to him, and the cross is where God did that. Peace is made not by ignoring sin, but by absorbing it, and that's what Jesus did. Verse 21 says this, once you were alienated, that's actually one of our words, once you were alienated, but he has now reconciled you. Once you were distant, but now you are brought near. Now, and get this, God sees you through the lens of Jesus, which means he sees you as blameless and secure and holy unto him. And God gently urges us then to continue in our faith, not moved from the hope held out in the gospel, not swayed, all these things that we're hearing in our lives, the things we experience, but to hold on to Christ. Treat him as and not treating him as the beginning of something better. Christ isn't just a doorway to a good life. Christ is your life. So let me ask you something. Where in your life are you still looking for more? Not because you don't love Jesus, but because somewhere along the way you started believing that I might need to take control of this. Maybe you're trying to hold everything together. Maybe you're exhausted from carrying what isn't meant for you to carry. And here's the truth. The same Jesus who created the universe is the same Jesus holding your life together, and the same Jesus who shed his blood to bring you peace. You're not held by your performance. You're not defined by it. You're not sustained by your strength. You're held together in Jesus. And so this week, maybe instead of asking what more do I need, ask first, is Jesus truly all I need and the center of my life? It's not a slogan, it's an orientation. It means everything else finds its place in relation to him, not alongside. Because when Jesus is enough, all these feelings kind of change. You know, that feeling of being alienated changes to being reconciled. God doesn't move to you, he moves you to him. Those feelings, maybe today you're searching for something, but that feeling is settled because of who Jesus is. Or maybe that fragmented feeling that you're all over the place, God can give you the peace that passes all understanding. And this is the message for you, for us, but it's also a message that we share with other people. We have got to be sharing the good news of Jesus and not giving a theological thing, but just a simple interaction with people in your daily work, in your daily life, your school, wherever you are, just simply telling people that you're praying for them and coming alongside them. I'm going to close with a story of something that happened with Kelly and I just this last Friday, 2 days ago. So many of you know Kelly owns a scone shop, and I think there's still some scone crumbs out there if Liz Hack didn't eat them all from first service. But so on Friday, we went out and we were going to deliver these scones, and Kelly had an order online, and her name was Cheryl, and she ordered, and the process is you pay, and then we figure out a time when we can deliver them. Well, she didn't hear from Cheryl again, and so Kelly says, well, I'm just feeling kind of nudged. I'm just going to make these scones. We have her address. Let's just go over and just see if she's there. If she's not there, we'll just leave them for giggles. What are we going to do with them? So we get in the car, and we drive over, and Kelly gets out of the car, walks up. I'm in the car, knocked on the door, and the lady Cheryl opens the door, and Kelly goes inside, and they close the door. And I'm like, oh, cool. And I'm sitting in the car. 5 minutes pass. 10 minutes pass. 25 minutes pass. And my mind does what many minds do. I'm thinking Kelly's either having a great conversation or she's been abducted. That's just where my mind goes. But eventually she comes back out. Her eyes are a little bit red, and her heart is a little bit heavy, and she says to me, we're going to back out of the driveway, and once we get going, I'll tell you what just happened. So we back out of the driveway, and I see Cheryl in the window watching us leaving. Start going down the road. Turns out Cheryl's husband of 51 years had died a week ago. So not this Friday, but the Friday before, kind of suddenly. And those scones at that point, they weren't about breakfast. They were about grief. They were about loneliness, and they were about someone needing to be seen. Kelly, when she delivered the scones, just sat there with Cheryl and listened and talked. And she asked the best question you could ever ask somebody who's lost somebody, whether it was a week ago or 10 years ago. She said, tell me about Blaine, her husband. Which caused me to sit in the car for 25 minutes. But beside the point, she said, tell me about him. And Kelly just prayed with her. Didn't know her faith, still don't. But Kelly was present. And here's the thing, none of this was planned. We didn't plan this. There's no strategy, there's no checklist, there's no big moment, we could control. Jesus was just at the center, quietly enough. And when you keep Jesus at the center, you'll discover he's more than enough in any situation that you encounter. He has enough wisdom when you don't know what to do. He's enough compassion when you don't even know what to say. He's enough presence when fixing just isn't possible. And when Jesus is more than enough, it changes everything, because ordinary errands become holy ground. Simple acts become sacred moments. And what looks small, like a box of scones, becomes a doorway for grace. When Jesus is at the center, we can kind of just stop asking, is this enough? Because we can always trust what he says, that Jesus is more than enough. And that changes everything. Amen? Amen. Let's stand to pray.